Some of the most frequently asked support questions regarding Linux involve package management. How can I update my software, install software, remove software? And regarding removing software, one of the most frequently asked questions is how can I completely remove a program from my system? And by completely remove, I'm not talking about just removing the executable binary, the actual program itself. I want to remove all its dependencies, the libraries, any kind of specific config files that were generated when I installed that program. I want everything associated with that program removed from my system. How can I do that? Well, let's discuss it. Now, there are so many different package managers available on Linux. There's so many ways to install software on Linux. I can't possibly talk about every single package management system, so I'm just going to cover some of the most popular ones on this video. By far, the most popular package manager on Linux is the apt package manager. The apt package manager is the package manager for Debian and Ubuntu and all distributions based on Debian and Ubuntu. The apt package manager is also used in PC Linux OS, which is a RPM distribution, oddly enough, but it uses the apt package manager. So let's go ahead and open a terminal here inside Ubuntu is what I'm demonstrating this on. Typically, to remove software using the apt package manager, you would sudo apt remove and then the name of the program, whatever it happens to be. If I was, uninstalling Firefox, for example, sudo apt remove Firefox. Now, the problem with the sudo apt remove Firefox command here is that it's just going to remove the program, Firefox. It's not going to remove any configuration files that were placed on the system when you installed Firefox. And this really is standard practice with most remove or uninstall commands with most Linux package managers. It's typically when you uninstall a program, it doesn't remove all the associated config files and stuff like that. It doesn't remove dependencies most of the time. So how do you get rid of everything? Well, here inside Debian or Ubuntu using the apt package manager, instead of sudo apt remove, you want to run the command sudo apt purge name of program. And when you run this command, it should remove the program itself. It should also remove all system-wide config files. And by system-wide config files, I mean config files that live somewhere inside the root file system, not in your home directory. These are not user-specific config files. These are system-wide config files. You typically think of them as the default config files that are usually installed when you install a program. Now, one thing sudo apt purge doesn't do is it doesn't automatically remove the dependencies that were needed. If Firefox had some dependencies and they're no longer needed, they don't get uninstalled right away. What you would need to do is somewhere along the way, you want to run the sudo apt auto remove command, and this will get rid of any unneeded dependencies, any orphan packages and things like that. And typically, you don't necessarily have to run this command yourself. A lot of times when you just update your system with a sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade, a lot of times the apt package manager is smart enough to let you know when you have some unneeded stuff on your system, and it will actually prompt you to run the apt auto remove command when you need to. Now, that takes care of almost everything that was associated with that program. Once you run sudo apt purge name of program, and then you also do the sudo apt auto remove just to make sure there's no unneeded dependencies still on the system. At that point, everything associated with that program should be gone except any user config files. So these are config files that live inside your home directory. On Linux, typically, let me open the graphical file manager. Typically on Linux, you'll have a config folder. Let me show hidden files. I believe Control H shows hidden files in most file managers. There it is. And we have a folder here called .config. Let's go into the .config directory. And then you see all of these various folders. For example, Nautilus, which is the file manager I'm in, has a config file, right? So it has a config directory where I could put some config information. There is nothing in this directory. It's an empty directory. Let's see if gedit has a config file that actually is here. Yeah, there is a file associated with gedit, which is a plain text editor. So if I uninstalled gedit right now, I did a apt purge, this directory is still going to be here. The reason is this is in my home directory. It's one of my own config files. It's a user config file that I could edit and manage myself. And package managers on Linux typically can never touch your home directory. They are not allowed to touch your home directory or any files or directory in your home directory. They're not given that kind of permission, and that's done for safety reasons. Let me go back to the terminal here. And just to verify this is the case, if I do a sudo apt purge gedit, let's go ahead and remove it. And you can see gedit's going to be removed. These were some of the packages that are no longer necessary, so we'll do an apt remove to remove those packages once we uninstall gedit. So now let's do the sudo apt auto remove. Let's get rid of those unneeded dependencies because we removed gedit, so those are no longer necessary. And now if I go back to the file manager, you can see in our .config directory, we still have this gedit directory with a gedit config file. It can't remove that. Package managers, again, they're not allowed to touch your home directory. So to remove this, what you would have to do is you would just have to delete it yourself. I hit and delete on the keyboard on that directory. It's gone. Now, the reason these package managers can't touch your home directory is because obviously, it would be dangerous because all of your user data, of course, lives in your home directory. Typically, you save like all of your documents in home/documents and all of your videos, home/videos, yada, yada, yada. Package management systems could be dangerous if they were allowed, for example, to move files, delete files. You know, it could cause you some data loss. That's why package managers like apt and pacman and things like that, they will never touch your home directory. So your user config files, you always are responsible for deleting those. You have to go and manually delete those yourself. Now let's talk about how to do what we just did using the pacman package manager, which of course is the package manager on Arch Linux and all distributions based on Arch Linux. So let me open a terminal. I'm going to zoom in. So typically to remove a package in pacman, most people are probably going to run pacman -R and then the name of whatever program that you want to uninstall. This removes just the program. It does not remove those system-wide config files. It doesn't remove dependencies, but we can take care of that if instead of just -R, I added ns to that. Now what this will do, this will remove the program and it will also remove all dependencies associated with that program. And that pretty much takes care of everything. It's kind of like the sudo apt purge and the sudo apt auto remove command all in one command here. So pacman -R lowercase ns will take care of everything except any user config file. So anything in your actual user's home directory, you know, home/.config/name of program, you'll have to go find that stuff yourself and delete it manually. Everything else, though, everything that's in the root file system associated with this program and all its dependencies, they should be removed automatically with this command. Now let's talk about snap packages. So if I do a snap list, I'm not sure what snaps I have installed on the system. Let me get a few here. Typically, well, let me install a snap package that I know exists. I'm going to do a sudo snap install corny jokes. Corny jokes is really just a weird little funny program that really serves no purpose. It's just a nice small program that serves as a good example of how to install a program using snap. So sudo snap install corny jokes. Now that I've done that, let's see what all that installed on my file system. So if I do a sudo find on root, which is searching in the root directory, so search my entire file system using the find command, -iname and sensitive name search for the string corny jokes. This may take a minute since it's searching the entire file system. And it finished running that search using the find command. So these are all the corny jokes files and directories on the system. We do have one in our home directory at home/dt/snap because snap has a directory in the home directory, and then corny jokes. So this would be user-specific corny jokes stuff living in the home directory, right? But then everything else is in the root file system. You can see most of it is in /var/lib/snapd, typically where all the snap stuff, the system-wide snap stuff exists. So the typical command to remove a snap pack is sudo snap remove corny jokes. So let's go ahead and remove corny jokes with snap remove. Now that I've done that, if I run that sudo find command on root again for the string corny jokes, let's see if it actually removed everything. And as you can see, it removed everything in the root file system, but it cannot go in the home directory. It is not allowed to remove anything from your home directory. And again, that's typical with package management systems. They're just not allowed to do that. So once again, if you want to go and delete that particular directory, what you would need to do is just go into your file manager yourself, go in your home directory /snap/corny jokes and just delete that yourself. Now, let me clear the screen. let's talk about Flatpaks. Let me do a Flatpak list, see what all I have installed as a Flatpak currently. Now, typically to uninstall something with a Flatpak, you would do sudo Flatpak uninstall, I believe, and then, well, I don't actually use ungoogled Chromium. Well, let me actually remove that. You just copy that and then paste that. And you can see it wants to remove ungoogled Chromium or ungoogled Chromium codecs. Actually, we want both of those removed. One is a dependency of the other. So that should remove everything associated with ungoogled Chromium. But let's actually do a sudo find unroot -iname. And let's just see. Let me do a search for the string ungoogled. And yes, there is no file or directory on the system anymore that has the string ungoogled, so I do think it actually deleted everything, but there is a flag, I believe, associated with Flatpak. So if I did Flatpak uninstall and then --delete -data, I believe that is another kind of command that will also make sure that all data associated with the program, everything, gets deleted. Obviously, it won't go in your home directory and like go into .config and remove any of your user config files. Once again, you're going to have to do that yourself. Probably the easiest package management system to manage as far as, getting rid of everything associated with a program are app images. So let me actually open my graphical file manager. Let me go in my home directory /applications. So this is your home directory /applications with a capital A. This is where all app images should live on your system. And with app images, there's not really a package manager necessarily. You don't go to the command line to remove software with app images. They're these self-contained binaries. Well, they're these self-contained binaries, but it's really an archive. It includes the binary, the program itself. It includes all the dependencies. So, for example, if I wanted to remove, for example, this LibreOffice app image, and I just delete it, and just hit the delete key, right? LibreOffice, that app image is gone. Everything associated with LibreOffice, all the dependencies, they were all in that app image. So there's nothing else for me to do. The only thing that could be left on the system is if I had a specific config file for LibreOffice, wherever LibreOffice puts config files. I don't even know if you have user config files associated with LibreOffice. I'm sure you do. They'd probably be in your home directory .config/LibreOffice. If that exists, I would have to go and manually delete that myself. Another thing we should talk about briefly is what happens if you build packages yourself. You build a program from source. How do you completely remove that stuff from your system? Well, you have to manage that yourself because the package manager doesn't know about programs you build from source. For example, let me go into some of my source code stuff here. So I maintain my own builds of ST, for example, the suckless simple terminal, right? And this is the source code for it. So if I want to actually remove ST from my system, what I would need to do is I would need to find out when I actually make the package and build the package, where does the binary get placed? Where do any extra libraries get placed? I would have to go find those on the system. And there's no easy way to figure this out other than possibly reading the make file. So if I read the make file here, and I'll open it in NeoVim. That gives me some idea of what happens when you actually make the package. So you can see directories it makes and things it moves around. It copies certain files. It copies the ST binary to /bin, for example. It also tells me where the man page gets placed. It also tells me where the README information gets copied to. So it tells me where a lot of the files associated with ST gets placed on the system just by reading that make file. And this is really one of the reasons why you typically don't want to build software from source unless you have to. It's because some of these programs, they'll put all kinds of stuff all over your file system. They're placing files everywhere on the file system. None of this stuff is managed by any package manager, right? Because you built it from source, you're managing all of that stuff yourself, or you're supposed to. And what happens if you build a lot of programs from source? Over time, you're going to have all this extra cruft just hanging out on your file system. So unfortunately, that is something that you're just going to have to deal with yourself, or what you would probably need to do, what I typically do, is I avoid building anything from source unless absolutely necessary. Unless I can't find it in any package manager available on Linux, Then I'll build it from source. And of course, I didn't cover every single package manager available on Linux, but they're all very similar. All of them have a way to uninstall a program with all its dependencies and all its system-wide config files. None of them will let you delete user data. So anything in your user's home directory, they cannot touch. So make sure you always go into .config and look for any config files associated with that program and delete those. Also go into home/.cache and delete any old cache files associated with that deleted program. And then you may also want to go and look in home directory /.local/share name of program for some extra libraries that may be hanging out in that particular directory. Now, before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank the producers of this episode: Gabe, James, Matt, Maxim, Mimit, Mitchell, Paul, West, Why You Bald Homie, Alex, Armor Dragon, Chuck, Commander Angry, Yokai, George Lee, Marstrom, Nate, Jan, Alexander, Paul, Peace Arch and Fedora, Polytech, Realities for Less, Red Prophet, Roland, Steven, Tools Deviler, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. Without these guys, this episode would not have been possible. The show's also brought to you by each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now, these are all my supporters over on Patreon, because I don't have any corporate sponsors. I'm sponsored by you guys, the community. If you like my work, want to see more videos about Linux and free and open source software, subscribe to DistroTube over on Patreon. Peace, guys. When it comes to removing a program, app image for the win.